KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Moriarty from the Spice Mines of Kessel. Dagan, how are you, my friend?
All wings report in. I'm good. I mean, how bad can I be? I sat around eating burritos and watching Star Wars this afternoon.
Nice.
Slacker kind of style, man.
What
Unemployed
kind of
style.
Talk to me.
Oh, burrito. Do you know what? They're microwave burritos.
Yeah.
Sounds gross, but they're
I like
delicious.
the microwave. I like some of the microwave burritos.
What is the brand? Red something. They're really good. Steak burritos, not beef. Steak burrito, steak, bean, and cheese. Oh, dude, so good. Little side of potato chips.
So you're saying not ground beef, but like cut steak.
Right, yeah. Steak.
Right.
Got to differentiate between not the... the beef usually refers to the ground beef, right? But we're talking about steak. Pieces of steak. Chunks.
What was that? Remember, you know that Dad used to buy them, I think, like the cheap brand of like bean burrito and stuff, or cheese burrito. You know what I'm talking about?
Tina's,
yeah, I think that was what. And I liked those when I was a kid quite a bit, but
they're good.
The you gotta make sure you're calibrated right, because you know what's gross is when it's still cold. I mean, you got to make sure whatever microwave you're using, you got to make sure it's good to go. Well,
yeah, absolutely.
Well, it's good to be here with you, Dag, and thank you all out there for being with us here today. This is KnockBack, our retro and nostalgia podcast. You have, I don't even know how many episodes there are, but you have 5 years worth of podcasts to go back to and listen to if you'd like, if you're new. We're doing Star Wars: A New Hope from 1977 today. This is a topic we always said we would never do just because we were being dickheads. But finally, I was like, we're going to every other week now that Constellation is this smash hit. Thank you for all of that. If you guys aren't listening, Constellation is our new conversational podcast that Dagan and I do with the whole Last Stand Media crew with a rotating cast. It's doing awesome. It's our second biggest show now, which is super dope.
Fun.
It was, as of the time of recording, in the top 10 on leisure on iTunes in the leisure category, which is pretty cool.
It's amazing.
So thank you for that. How do you feel about that? Feeling good?
I mean, I'm overwhelmed by that. And you know what the greatest part is? I love the reception early on. It's awesome. I hope we hold on to it and hope it even improves, not to be greedy. But I'm just having so much fun with the show. It's such a breath of fresh air just to do and have conversations. It's just natural, organic talking with your friends. I mean, sure. and people responding to that. Yeah, man, I'm very pleased. How do you feel?
I feel great. I mean, I have a really good instinct for what the audience wants, and I suspected that this was going to be a bigger show for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think I had some non-believers in the company that didn't, everyone I think was behind it, but no one believed. I was like, I think this is going to be pretty sizable for us. And so it is. So thank you for joining us over there. But anyway, this knocks our show Knockback to every other week. Constellation goes every week. And so we're returning here with a topic we thought we would never do, but I thought it would be fun to kind of go with a bang because I want us to hit bigger and better topics this year. If we're going to do it half as much, we should redouble our efforts to make sure that they're good topics. And
agreed.
I especially talk, and we'll get right into it here. I especially talk so much shit about Star Wars these days that I feel like it's only fair to go back to where it all began. Something that I think we all unanimously love. I don't know that I know that there are people out there that don't like Star Wars, but If you like Star Wars, then obviously you like the original Star Wars movie. So I think that there's a lot to celebrate and talk about here. However, I was writing notes. I was watching the movie. I've seen this movie. It's like a fucking ungodly amount of times at this point. I don't even know. I mean, I think we've all seen this movie so many times, but
hundreds.
But I was trying to like look in the negative space of all of the shots and just think of things to talk about and look at different things and examine different things, rewind sometimes. And I made a list of things that I wanted to discuss because, and they're just random things. We can talk about the characters and Luke and Leia and Han, but I feel like that's kind of boring. I mean, the one thing about this conversation as I kick it over to you is that I don't know that there's any nerd property that has been discussed more than this particular movie. And so how do we add to it thoughtfully? And interestingly, I think we do it by just talking about random things. And so, yeah, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, probably like 12 or 15 things that I just wrote down, random one lines of things I want to discuss with you that have nothing to do with the main characters necessarily, but some of the scenery, some of the ships, some of the other characters, some of the world building, I think that'll be a good way to go about it. But before we do that, I wanted to kick it over to you because this is a movie of your childhood and your young childhood and a foundational film and experience that I think built you into maybe the nerd that you became. So a very seminal film for you. I was born in 1984, so I was born after the original trilogy was over. I'm coming in later. You're coming in fresh, not too old at the time. I think 4?
Yeah,
3
I
or
was just
4
4 when I first saw it. Yeah. Yep.
So it's pretty young. And then so 4, 7, and 10 is how you experience the Star Wars movies, which is like a pretty good age to experience them, I think. But
definitely
talk to me about what you remember about this, and we can go from there.
Yeah, man. I mean, this is great. I love that we're coming back to 1977 Star Wars last, because I don't think we'll be talking about Star Wars again for a while on KnockBack, I predict. So it's kind of cool to go back to the origin point. You know, Kyle, as you said before, Star Wars was divisive. Just at the very beginning, the birth of this pop culture and nerd culture legend, in many ways, the granddaddy of nerd culture. I mean, one of the things that put the idea of nerd culture on the map, starting in 1977, you know, at the beginning of this franchise, of course, the film that will spawn this franchise, at first for better, and then a lot of us would say then for worse, and then maybe for better again lately. I don't know. That's in the eye of the beholder. But I love going back to this time of, as I call it, the letter P, right? Potential, possibility, promise, purity. Just going back in Star Wars, it's so funny to think back to 1977. I was a freshly minted 4-year-old, right? Star Wars came out in May of 77. To my best recollection, I didn't see it until December, mid-December of 77, when somebody in Dad's firehouse in Brooklyn had it on reels on a projector and was projecting it on the firehouse wall during the annual Christmas party, firehouse Christmas party. And I remember being riveted from that moment. I don't remember specific memories of specific parts of the film, but what I do remember is I always looked forward to that firehouse Christmas party every year because
legendary.
It was legendary in our family.
Yeah.
It was like something that we really looked forward to. It was the only time we really got into Brooklyn, East New York, Brownsville, Brooklyn, which is a really kind of a dicey neighborhood, especially back in the 80s, 70s and 80s. And I had a group of friends who were the children of Dad's colleague firefighters that this was really the only time of year, maybe with the exception of the summer barbecue, firehouse barbecue, that I would see these kids. So I really relished the opportunity to play with these kids and see my friends like Matt and some other dudes that I wouldn't see any other time of the year. But I remember that not being important at all this year. I was just transfixed by what was being projected on the wall there. The Star Wars film. And I don't even know how Dad's friends got, maybe they knew a projectionist or something, that they got the reels, they got the projector. I remember the sound being a little bit behind the picture, but it wasn't, and that was weird. It wasn't like watching television, right? But it didn't even matter. Like it just completely zombified by what I was seeing, the action, the characters, Vader, all that kind of stuff. And that's where the love affair with Star Wars started. So funny to think back. At that time, Star Wars quickly became a household name, right? Maybe quicker than any pop culture thing you could even imagine. But at that time, Star Wars really could have went on to be anything. I mean, it could have went over like a lead balloon. We didn't really know at that point, right? It was brand new. Who knew it would be this iconic thing that Disney eventually buys and turns into this multimedia frenzy where, there's a theme park and a channel and it's owned by Disney and TV shows and all these things. But this was the humble beginnings. And I love going back to that time of it was just this one thing before, whether you love Star Wars in the end or don't. And some of the pieces we love and some of the pieces we don't, and we argue about it. Again, it's very divisive. But this beginning represents such purity for me because it's before everything got so saturated, before Star Wars was everywhere and everything. And you just couldn't go 2 feet without running into another Star Wars TV series and stuff. So I just love going back to this period and thinking about what it was back then and what captured our imaginations, and like just everything about it that captured the imaginations of so many millions of people, especially generationally for me, Gen Xers. What spoke to us about this thing? And going in and just looking at it from that perspective is so interesting. I have to say, I every time I watch it, and I've watched it, I don't even know. I honestly wish I knew the number of times I've seen this movie. It's a lot. I mean, it could be in the multi-hundreds at this point. I have no idea, but it's a lot. But yeah. I always find something new in it, and I always enjoy it to the point of I can't even think of another film that resonates like that. Maybe not even another Star Wars film outside of the original trilogy, which just makes it an interesting conversation. Like you said, it has been done to death, has been talked to death by all the nerd culture, windbaggery out there, us included.
Totally.
But it'll be, I like your strategy for breaking it down and just going through and talking about it from maybe a different vantage point. That sounds like a good idea to me.
Well, it's just that there's obviously a story and a main line. We all know it. We all know Darth Vader. We all know Luke, and we all know how. I think we can talk about them as they come up, but in watching it and looking in the negative space, I was just like, there's so many other things to discuss in this movie that are really interesting, both from, like I said, a production standpoint, characters, world building, and all that. So we'll go through some of this list. But one of the things you said here that I thought was interesting was, humble beginnings. And I feel like, isn't it interesting that the instinct then, when something became really big, I imagine George Lucas was like, okay, very savvy dude, owned the rights, made the films with his own money, never borrowed shit. Totally wise, right? And keeping, in return for production rights, keeping the licensing. This is really savvy, completely brilliant stuff. But even then, his instinct was 3 movies, couple of TV things, toys, which were huge, and we'll talk about those, and other licensing, your T-shirts and all of that. It just seems so quaint. Maybe he had a holiday record or something, and it just didn't say your soundtrack. It just doesn't seem so egregious. Everyone's instinct these days is to be like, what can we do to just murder this thing, and so that you hate it. And with this, it makes me wonder. In watching this movie, I kept going back. I'm like, what if? I don't want anything to happen to George Lucas, of course. What if George Lucas just died in 1989? Let's even after that, because that was the year that Last Crusade came out. Let's say 1991. George Lucas just died. Imagine Star Wars and Indiana Jones, although Indiana Jones, Spielberg too, but especially Star Wars. Imagine if they were just left alone, much like Back to the Future has been left alone, very intentionally left alone by the people that are saying basically over my dead body.
Right.
Is this ever coming back? And that's such a different instinct. And so I like that you said that, because it doesn't seem so humble in looking back at it, because George Lucas became gratuitously wealthy off of this. But in a way, he did it by betting on himself and the core product. Famously, when they made Empire, he funded it. It's like, how many people were probably dying to fucking pay to make Empire Strikes Back and do whatever they want. So I like that you brought up that word. I'm glad that you said that. And I like that you brought up 1977 as well, that December, because if my Kenner history is right, that was the famous or infamous Christmas when you got no toys.
Yeah.
Instead, you got the box with the pictures of the toys on it.
Their certificate.
Yeah, which is so funny too, because what stopped them from getting those done quicker? That's always been my question. What is stopping you? These are just fairly basic. They're not computer renders. There was no such thing as computer renders. The pictures of those things were the models and the molds that they were using. So I was always so confused by that. Like, where are the toys? But nonetheless, did you
get these done fast?
Did you get any of that? Do you remember for the Christmas?
No, but Tommy did have that initial set, because it came with that gray plastic standee with the cardboard space backdrop. That was all the notorious, the tall blue snaggletooth. That was all part of that package, I believe. And I missed all of that. I must have came in just after that. And again, my best friend Tommy, how did his parents have the insight to get in on the ground floor of all these things. I'm not sure. I really don't know, because I don't remember them as nerdy toy collectors themselves. I mean, again, you guys got to remember, this was the mid to late 70s.
Isn't there some level of urgency in getting in touch with these people? I mean, I don't know, like they come up so much that shouldn't we be talking to them?
It's fascinating.
Like, can't we just ask them, like, what was that all about? First of all, I've said before, if Tommy has those unopened G.I. Joes, like all of his unopened G.I. Joes, I don't even know what I would do to get my hands on those things.
Can you imagine?
So, but with Star Wars stuff's even more valuable, believe it or not, even though it was made so much. And the new Star Wars stuff, like we always say, 1995 on, worthless. But that old stuff, 77 to 85, because they kept making new Star Wars toys until 85 under the Power of the Force moniker instead of Return of the Jedi.
That's right.
Where the last like randos were coming out. I think like the torture droid was in there and some random stuff from Jabba's palace. I did want to ask you this quick question, Dig. This is a total aside, although it has to do with the toys. It was something I was thinking about before we even get into the matter of the movie itself. Is my instinct correct that your Star Wars toys were kind of off limits to me as a child? I asked this because, and it's neither here nor there, apropos of nothing. I had unfettered access to your G.I. Joes. I don't know if it was just because we got into them together. You introduced me to them. I still remember you got me my first figure, the lamprey, and all of this. I remember it very, very well. But then with Star Wars toys, they felt more like they were really important to you, even as a kid. Like, we don't touch those. We don't go to those. Is there anything to that, you think?
You know what? That's funny. I don't really remember. I do remember you being very drawn, obviously, early on to G.I. Joe specifically. Do you remember if I shared my Transformers with you too?
You showed them to me, but I wasn't really ever interested in them.
You never really.
Same thing with Mask. Like Mask was on like towards the beginning of my memories, but Transformers. Weirdly enough, I never vibed with Transformers. I don't know why. I just don't.
Yeah,
I don't care for them.
Graydon didn't either. Yeah, there's something about that. Yeah, Transformers and Mask specifically came late in my toy collecting. Those are the last things I collected before I gave it up in the latter half of 6th grade into 7th grade. So those would make sense that I would still kind of keep those and covet those because I was still kind of actively involved in collecting them. The Star Wars thing I don't remember with you. Now I know specifically my Star Wars toys are in Rubbermaid bins in our basement, but my figures over 2 cases, the C-3PO case and a random Empire Strikes Back sort of leather bound or pleather bound case, are in Graydon's closet. But Graydon's never expressed any interest in Star Wars at all. And he collected the Imaginext sort of Fisher Price Mattel. They were sort of Little People meets actual action figures. They were like cute, kiddified, preschool-y type action Star Wars sets. Really well made, beautifully made. Kind of on a cuter, smaller scale. Everything was kind of squashed and very appealing looking. But he never really took an interest in even sitting collecting those and giving those to him as a kid and playing on the floor with him. He never really took an interest. But that is weird because I don't remember that. My earliest memories of you being a real big Star Wars fan was collecting them yourself and having them in your room at Dad's house with that custom made shelf that we've talked about. But I don't remember you being little with Star Wars.
Yeah,
it
just wasn't.
Don't remember.
Yeah, like it wasn't. It was interesting. Like we never went. I saw them. I remember them. I remember being fascinated by the AT-AT and all the rest because it was so huge. But and you should break that out and put that on one of your shelves or something. That's I fucking love the AT-AT. Such an awesome.
They're such cool toys.
Empire's so cool, but yeah, I was just thinking about that because I just felt like I had so much. I still have a lot of your G.I. Joes. They're just mixed up with mine.
Right.
Now I said as I'm collecting the full 82 to 94 G.I. Joe collection, I basically have it all. It's just in my closet. I haven't just put them on the shelf yet, but I did take our stuff and put it all separately. So like everything we played with as a kid is just totally separate and untouched.
That's cool.
And then this is all like just for collecting. But yeah, sure. I just wanted to ask you about that. You should bring out something like the Slave or something like that. Although I know that they don't call it the Slave or the Slave One anymore.
Oh yeah, what is it? Boba's Fett ship or Starship or whatever it's called now.
The bounty hunter, the evil intergalactic bounty hunter, he would never name his ship the Slave.
Slave One, baby. Those toys were. I think the Slave One might be in my closet. I'll get it out in one of the next episodes.
Because it's got the handle in it, right? Where like you could. That's so cool. I love that
looks
shit.
like an iron.
Yeah, yeah. I think they used the same molds for the stuff I had, and just changed the date stamps.
I think so too. Yeah, which makes sense from a profitability standpoint, right? But I remember the B-wing, specifically the AT-AT, the Imperial shuttle. Those are massive toys. As Ewok Village, Death Star playset, they were big toys. I mean, these were big playsets in the time where that was still a thing. Now action figures are still a thing, especially for adult collectors, sort of returning to that milieu. But playsets, that's the memory, man, of just sitting on the floor and having those. You know, it's like Castle Grayskull. Like those things will go down in history because playsets were important back then. Kids wanted those. It wasn't just Legos and video games. So yeah, that would be cool to do like a special little addendum to KnockBack where we go through all the old Star Wars toys and stuff. You know, the other thing too is, interestingly, what you had mentioned early on is you came the year after the Star Wars trilogy ended. So it was interesting. I guess your fandom really did start up, not even with Power of the Force or whatever they were doing.
No, they called our run Power of the Force 2, which was like supposed to be the
right.
Remember the 1995 continuation? Yes. I think announced in 94 in preparation for that famous. For people that are younger, there was a famous re-released box set of Star Wars. I want to say in 93, 94, something like that, and it was the black box set, and it was like a picture. You know, it was like I think Return of the Jedi had like magenta overtones, Empire had like purple overtones, and all of this, and that was all in preparation for that THX. That was the whole big thing, and then 97, of course, in preparation. That was in preparation for the special editions, which were and which I watched the special edition fucking gun barrel down my throat, and then that was in preparation for episode 1 later on. So let's get into talking about the movie, man. And I want to start here. I'm going to jump around randomly.
Okay.
You know what my favorite set in the entire movie is? The conference room on the Death Star. Some of the best acting in the entire movie, some of the coolest characters, and some of the coolest intrigue. Why did we never get a guy like Tarkin ever again? They shouldn't have killed him. You know, I know that the movie stands alone. It doesn't really matter later on, but he's so good. And all of the officers are. The one guy talking shit to Vader, there's like clearly a backstory there, some beef with him. And the way that they talk about the Force specifically, which is something I'm going to talk about later as a religion, the coolest part of the Force. If you just knew about the Force through this particular film, you'd have a pretty different expectation of what it actually is than what I guess it actually is in the Disney continuity, especially. But I wanted to start there. What do you think about the Imperial officers in Star Wars on the Death Star and that circular table? It's an iconic shot, I think underrated. Of course, everyone thinks of the choke scene, which is cool, but there's quite a few things that happen in there that are interesting. So that's where I wanted to begin, with the Imperial officers and that cool set on the Death Star. Talk to me.
I mean, you read my mind. I mean, this is something that I was really dwelling on and watching it again this time. And so maybe something, in all fairness, I haven't really paid attention to. And I'll come full circle to this because it started with me thinking about Peter Cushing as Tarkin and Alec Guinness, certainly, right? 2 actors specifically of their generation, and why they're so good, and why not only those 2, but almost every actor, big or small parts in this movie, just about to a person, their performances are so wonderful in a movie that was pretty weird for 1977. How did they all just apparently get it or fake it to that degree? And I started to think about Cushing and Alec Guinness, that generation of actors specifically. And those guys were just consummate professionals, like that class, that generation, that era of actors, whether they were doing some Roger Corman B-grade schlock, a Hammer horror film, or Lawrence of Arabia, a big multi-million-dollar Hollywood blockbuster. It didn't matter. They always delivered 110%. Those actors just never phoned it in. And so it wasn't really faking it. It was really just delivering their 100% what they were capable of every time out, regardless of how it was going to land. They just came in and did their job to the best of their ability because they were just such wonderful professionals. And that Imperial conference room, all those guys, all those randos around that Imperial conference table are just kind of some of them are a little younger, but around the same generation, character actors of the stage and screen from that era. And they all had that same sort of work ethic. They just came, and probably, honestly, a lot of them were probably stymied by the material, right? They were just like, I don't know what the hell this is, but I know what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to deliver. And I think that's one of the reasons what makes Star Wars, this movie specifically, hold up so well 45 years on, is like those performances really ground this outrageous craziness of what this must have seemed like. Of course, you're coming off of Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and, the very campy sci-fi material of the 20s, 30s, 40s, and all that kind of stuff. But this had to be weird, right? George Lucas had a strange vision, and it wasn't delivered tongue-in-cheek like a lot of other sci-fi or campy or cheesy. There's none of that. And for everybody to collectively just get it and deliver, I think that Imperial conference room, those couple of scenes are really great proof of that, right? Like those guys, like I just buy them. I buy like the political infighting, the bad blood, the arguing, the bickering, and not just Tarkin and not just Vader, like all those guys. Like I get like they're like a cohesive unit, and it's like you could see like there's a bad family dynamic going on there, and they all just deliver, even if they have one line. And it's not even, I would say the Imperial officers that we see, there's always a different dude reporting to Vader. They're all amazing. Like they all just stand and deliver and help ground this performance. And I don't think, Lucas is not known to be an actor's director. So it's strange for everybody to have the ownness and just say, okay, I'm just gonna give it like the old college try. And they all, and it works. It just works. Those scenes are just really wonderful. Those dudes are just amazing. Lamb chops, very, very 70s.
Totally. Like just put on awesome. The spacesuit, no other differences to there. I was even looking at some picture. I don't know who it was of someone. Was it Greedo? No. It was like someone in the cantina who has one of the, like a shirt on that with those sharp ass collars, 70 collars. Like I was like, oh my God. It's so funny how the 1970s leads into this. Right. Definitely. Not which is much, very, very funny.
But a little bit.
No. So I'm looking at a quote list for the movie, and in the famous scene in the Imperial meeting room or whatever, war room, the guy who says like, what of the rebellion? That's a general tag. So a general. And then the guy who gets choked is Admiral Mahdi. So an admiral. And of course, there's just great quotes here. And I guess this will go into what I wanted to discuss next, which was the Force. The way that they talk about the Force is dope. It seems like the memory is lost. This is something they actually obviously had to write into the new movies to kind of explain what the hell is going on, why no one knows what's going on. In fact, like Luke's flipping, like Luke doesn't know anything, which is so strange. Like he doesn't know anything, as if he doesn't live in this. Like, are you that backwoods that you don't know fucking anything? And it would be even less believable if that footage, which we've never, I don't think, seen fully of Biggs and him at Anchorhead were shown, because then you would be like, well, you don't know anything and you have connections like this. Like, people, a guy in a rebellion, you don't know what the fuck the Force is. But anyway, there's Admiral Mahdi says to Vader, don't try to frighten us with your sorcerer's ways, Lord Vader. Your sad devotion to that ancient religion has not helped you conjure up the stolen data tapes or given you clairvoyance enough to help find the rebels' hidden fortress. And then obviously he gets choked. That's good shit. And it's what the Force should have always been. And remember, well, people might remember that we rewrote the new Star Wars movies so to make them better. And my whole thing was about using the Force as a religion and regaining that. So I loved that. And then, of course, and we've discussed this in the past in different ways, is Tarkin having the power over Vader to be like, release him. And Vader like does it is amazing. It's just good shit. Tarkin has so much gravitas. It's interesting. Who the hell is he? Who is this guy? He has, so like Vader has no respect for the admiral, who's presumably the head of the fleet. The general is presumably the head of the stormtroopers, but Tarkin, he's like, you could kill Tarkin in 2 seconds. There's nothing protecting Tarkin, nothing. And there's no one protecting any of them from Vader. So it's quite interesting. But let's talk a little bit about the Force. How do you feel about the representation of the Force? We only hear about it a little bit from Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, I think, and then obviously when Obi-Wan saves Luke and R2 from the Tuscan Raiders, there's the whole thing there. There's a lot of exposition in the Falcon about it, and between Vader and Obi-Wan on the Death Star. But it makes me wonder what the fuck George Lucas was thinking, because this is one of the coolest elements. Just leave it unexplained.
Yes.
Making it about blood, I just can't even believe that. In episode 1, it just ruined all of it, because it just seemed like this spiritual thing. Maybe you have it. Maybe you can tune into it. Maybe is it real? Is it not? I mean, does that guy have a lightsaber, but he's not using the Force, and all these different things, and bastardizing the traditions and the Sith. And I don't know, man. I feel like if we just looked at the Force through the lens of what this film shows us, it is awesome. And I was curious if you picked up on that too.
Yeah. I mean, I just love this era of just leaving it mystical and a little dubious and unexplained and magical, where you're not over explaining it. I did hear or read something relatively recently. I don't have anything substantive to back this up, but there was something about George Lucas had actually early on already kind of conceiving of the Force through this blood midichlorian thing, and it just never entered in to the original trilogy as it ended up for whatever reason. Eventually they would go on to explain it that way and everything, but it just does seem like a mistake. I mean, all we know about the Force going into this, by the end of this movie, is that it's some sort of religion meets magical power that only some people are capable of, and there's good users, light side users, and dark evil side users, wielders of this power. That's all we know about it. And it does leave it's just a basic thing, right? It just leaves more to the imagination to keep from over explaining it. It just makes it more interesting, and it just makes it more entertaining, because less is more. You don't want to over explain every aspect. And it also makes it seem more special. Like the people that are capable of wielding these powers for good or for evil are, inherently special people. It's a rare talent. And yeah, over explaining it just kind of, it drains the juice out. You know what I mean? It makes it lose its flavor. And you would think a filmmaker or a creative would know that. It just seems, I don't know. It's very strange. That's the reason. A lot of this conversation, I think Star Wars in general, a lot of the conversation hinges on whether George Lucas even got it or not, or did he? How lucky did he get? Versus how many brilliant people did he actually have around him? Versus how much of this was intentional? I think it's a fascinating part of the conversation. And something that I think is food for thought, even this many years in to the conversation, is like, I really don't know the answers to this. I think George Lucas had a lot of foresight and insight in many ways, and he's a genius in many ways. And I think some of this stuff happened in spite of some bad decisions and bad decision making and iffy choices. If that makes sense.
Well, to say the least. A man who really believed his own height. Tarkin says to Vader at some point, the Jedi are extinct. Their fire has gone out of the universe. You, my friend, are all that's left of their religion. It's just, I don't know. I love the different references there, and just a parting love to Tarkin.
Oh,
as we move on.
He's fascinating. I mean, dude, you got to read. I don't think you read the Tarkin novel, right? By
No. I didn't
James
read it.
Luceno. That book is wonderful because it explains a fascinating character that we don't get much of on the screen. Again, we'll see a little bit of him later on in Rogue One and stuff, but not much. But it explains not only his origins in a great way, but also the dynamic between him and Vader and the sort of rivalry in order to sort of vying for the spot at Palpatine's right arm, right? Like to be Palpatine's right hand, the vying for power that ends up in a mutual respect and kind of an understanding of we should do this as a team. Like, we're an awesome team. We don't need to be we don't need to have this infighting. We could do this together, and the mutual respect that comes out of it, where even like you said, Vader is they're colleagues, but Vader does have an unabiding respect for Tarkin. He really it is interesting to see this character who's the ultimate badass in the universe, right? Kind of answering to somebody. Later on, we'll see that with Palpatine, especially in Jedi, with the Vader Palpatine dynamic. But it is kind of cool to see, as Leia says, someone holding Vader's leash. And that makes the Tarkin character fascinating because we know what a badass Vader is. And he actually kind of answers to somebody. At least kind of abides by his colleagues' opinions and, trusts, and they have that mutual understanding, and, it's interesting. And the novel kind of fleshes that out a little bit more, which makes it a really cool read. Besides Tarkin being, kind of having a lot of the assets that Vader has, but being a lot older. Like, he was a great pilot. He was a gunslinger. He had a wonderful education. He came up with the silver spoon, but also his family valued all of the physical attributes like hunting and fighting and all that kind of thing too. So it's interesting to get that for Tarkin because he's a great character. You want more. And of course, by the end of the movie,
the shot of him smoke when he dies is awesome, but I do like that. They like establish it basically, like, yes, he is dead. But yeah, he's in my mind top 5 Star Wars characters, and that was really reiterated for me yesterday. Up there with 21B, Robot,
of course,
B-wing pilot,
okay,
and
Uncle Owen?
Uncle Owen and Bib Fortuna.
There you go. Okay, nice. 5
and
and
the horn player in Friggin' Dan, right?
Oh, friggin'
and Zuckus.
Friggin' Dan.
Dagan and I used to die just because it's Figurin' Dan, but we used to call him Friggin' Dan, and we just think it was the funniest thing. I don't know why. All right. I want to talk a lot about what's going on Tatooine. So let's start with Tatooine itself. One of the things that I was thinking about in regards to Star Wars, Tatooine is the central planet that a lot of Star Wars revolves around, which is interesting. And obviously it moves to Coruscant and other places in the books, and certainly in the new movies, there's this other thing. But Tatooine itself is a symbol and an emblem of Star Wars. It's in Episode 4. It's in Episode 6. It's in Episode 7, Episode 1, right? So on and so on and so on and so on. And in other places too.
Oh yeah, we see it lots of times.
But you know what I was thinking is we take for granted what Tatooine is. And I think this is where George Lucas's brilliance kind of comes into play. And I was curious what you thought about it. It's a desert planet. It's fucking boring. There's only one unique thing about it. It's got 2 suns. And in fact, when I was a kid, I thought that was a lens flare. I don't think I ever.
Did you really?
I don't think I realized like they're like the dual, like the binary system of Tatooine or whatever. And I'm like, what are you? I was probably my teens and like the expanded universe when I was reading it. It was something I definitely didn't know when I was a little kid. I thought it was like some weird effect or something. Like I'm looking at, like a lens flare. I was dumb and young and I didn't even know that there could be systems with 2 stars. So it didn't. And I like that particular aspect of it because it's very like Carl Sagan, new science at the time. Yes, there are binary systems and stars that are together, but it's these basic choices that build this really important foundational element to the movie. We don't really ever think about it or even talk about it. I think that he could have made an urban Coruscant-like planet. It could have been a jungle planet, which we see in Endor. It could have been the snow planet, which we see in Hoth and Empire. It could be a lot of different things, but that he chose a desert planet I thought was kind of daring because while it makes it other and weird, especially to a Western audience where we don't have a lot of access to that kind of land outside of the Southwest and we don't have that experience, it could be just boring and sterile, and yet it really works great. I'm wondering if you ever really thought about that, because I think I just take that choice for granted. Yeah, desert planet. Yeah, why not? And I'm wondering where that comes from and why it seems to work so well. So what do you think?
Yeah, that's a really great way to look at it. I don't know if I ever thought about it that way before, but it is a great setting for a starry-eyed farm boy to want to escape from, because it is so boring. It is there's not a lot of activity. There's not a lot of adventure outside of like Mos Eisley and I guess, Tashi Station. You know, like it's a place where there's not much happening. It's remote. It's boring. It's mundane. There's not much to do. There's large pockets of just vast emptiness in between choice homesteads or villages or towns or whatever. So you could see the Luke character wanting to escape from a place like that, where if he grew up in, you know, a city or somewhere with you know, with more activity, with more life, that sort of groping for something greater wouldn't really be as effective, right? Because he would already be around something more dynamic, or, you know, he's in Coruscant or somewhere that with the hustle and bustle. But you could see him wanting to escape from this place that's just, you know, kind of not very exciting for a 19-year-old boy, and wanting to, you know, longing for adventure and somewhere different and more color and more excitement. And so that's great. And, you know, I have to say too, man, every single time I've seen this, when Luke comes out of his little dome-like homestead house and half climbs up on that little berm of sand and the purple sky and looks up at those two setting suns, and John Williams' rousing score starts playing, I get emotional every fucking single time that comes on. I don't know, you know, it's just, that is maybe my favorite scene in any Star Wars movie. It's just, that's the whole, and especially for this film, that's what the whole movie's about. Just this kid realizing what his destiny is going to be. This seemingly insignificant person, not only longing for something more, but we know now, especially now after the whole trilogy plays out, we know what he's destined for. We know what he's going to go on to do. And yeah, man, I absolutely love it. But the Tatooine and the fact that they come back to Tatooine is also an interesting choice. Not only that, but echoing Tatooine in the sequel trilogies, Jakku, right? That was the Jakku planet, which was kind of like the sister planet of Tatooine.
Oh yeah,
like
right.
That's like right. The same exact thing, same exact setting, same exact
you're right. It's
geographical nature, and
yeah, it was all the echoes from that made Episode 7 work.
Yes,
I have no real problem with Episode 7. I have to be honest with you. It's
I know you really liked.
If they were all like that, it would have been a different trajectory for me in Star Wars. But it didn't turn out like that.
No,
and we were not going to. I want this to be a positive and fun episode. I don't want to. Everyone knows. Everyone gets it. All right. Since we were talking about Luke and Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, let's talk about some of the things surrounding them. I want to specifically talk about Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. Micah and I were watching it. Micah had never seen Star Wars, by the way, and we'd sat in there and watched it. I don't think
How did she like it?
I don't know. I don't think she was really paying very close attention. But one of the things I was saying to her was Dagan and I find Uncle Owen dead ass hilarious. Like everything he says is funny. Every way he delivers his lines is funny. It is not supposed to be funny. And because one thing she remarked, which is true, she's like, I didn't know that this movie had so much comic relief. And I'm like, it does. There's a lot of funny things. Han's funny, and obviously the droids are totally funny. But I was like, Uncle Owen's not supposed to be funny. But it comes off as funny. Hey, what are you trying to pull here? Like, about to beat the shit out of that Jawa. And he's like, oh, Danny. And I just love that. And he's just eating and all this and kind of just using Luke. And they're such interesting characters. And then Aunt Beru is so sweet and kind, a little more soft-spoken. What do you think of those characters? And the frustration that in the original run of Figures, they never made Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, which I thought was so peculiar.
So strange.
Yeah. Did they think people didn't want to buy like old burnt out people? Like Uncle Owen comes with this skeleton.
Oh my God. That scene is still so weird. It's such a Cronenberg-esque decision in the middle of a George Lucas movie. It's like, why did you have to? It was pretty intense as a kid. I remember for years thinking about, am I seeing that right? You know, are those the charred corpses of these two people, right, just like in poses of like torture, like they died horribly? It's not like they're at rest or something. They're like writhing. And yeah, that's one of those things that you would have thought would have hit the cutting room floor that just stayed in for whatever reason. So shout out to that scene. It still jars me. I'm like, wait, it's such a weird decision for what really does largely seem like a very good kids movie, right? But that's also very typical of 70s and 80s where, you know, it's like the melting faces at the end of Raiders. It's like all of a sudden we're going to be tortured.
We're going here now? Yeah, right. Exactly. You're right about the skeletons. I don't think I understood what I was really looking at for a long time when I was a kid.
It's like, are those robots? Are they burnt droids? And then
I just thought it was like all fucked up. It's like, all right, yeah, they fucked everything up or something. You know, I guess I wasn't looking that carefully. So, I didn't want to see.
It's so odd. But Uncle Owen is interesting because if you think of his character, it does make sense. You know, you have this guy, he's got this life of working a moisture farm. It's this hard scrabble, blue collar life of physical labor. There's probably not a lot of, like, I don't see Uncle Owen having any hobbies. He's just a hard ass. You know what I mean? Who's the probably the victim or the result or the, you know, the end result of a hard life. Maybe he grew up that way as a kid too and just inherited this thing of being a moisture farmer. It just how miserable he is sort of actually translates and makes sense, right? And then Aunt Beru being a little more sympathetic to Luke's plight, you know, of her nephew's desire to escape and start a life of his own, and being a little more sympathetic, where Owen's just about like, we got to get this, you know, we got to get this season in, we got to harvest, you know, we need more help, like that type of thing. And you know, you could see like it's a nice setup to create a little bit of that butting head dynamic between the uncle who, if he ever had a semblance of youth or what it was like to be a kid and want things and long for excitement and adventure, that part of him's long since died. And then the nephew who's like just going through that now of kind of responding to, kind of inherently knowing this isn't the life for him. Like he wants something more. There's something, not only something more to his desire, but there's probably some more innate things, you know, awakening in him, being the son of Anakin. Like, you know, he just kind of inherently knows that this isn't what he's cracked up to do. So, and I like that dynamic of the, you know, again, that family dynamic of like, you know, there's a source of consternation and they got to get through that. So, and I like that setup. And I like, you know, what we find out later on, where these people took Luke in order to protect him from, you know, the ultimate scourge of the universe, you know. So it's interesting, and you know, they do a great job with the acting too. That's another thing with the acting, where you really kind of believe that this is the aunt and uncle and this is the nephew and this is the family dynamic, and the kid grudgingly helps out and can't wait to get the hell out of there, and the aunt's kind of sympathetic to that, and the uncle's just kind of keeping him holding on year after year. Like, what is Uncle Owen's? Does he want Luke to just throw his hands up and stay? And
I don't. I was thinking the same thing. It's funny. It's like it's like the giver. You're assigned to moisture farmer, and that's just what you do. It's like, can you give this kid a break? What is going on here? He's in the
thing. That's not his thing.
Yeah, he's in the shit. I do love the idea of moisture farming. That was another thing I didn't even get when I was a kid. I was like, well, I don't know what the fuck these people do. But it's very clever, and something that, again, there's some complexities where I just don't know that 5 or 7-year-olds are getting them all, but I certainly wasn't.
Oh, I definitely wasn't.
So shout out to Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. That wizard's just a crazy old man. Probably my favorite Uncle Owen line. Love it. Since we're talking about Uncle Owen, I wanted to talk about Obi-Wan, just in the sense of, what is it about Obi-Wan just telling Luke everything? Isn't that weird? Like, Luke doesn't know anything, and then 1 hour later he like drives out into the, you know, R2 disappears trying to find Obi-Wan, 3PO and him go in the land speeder. Love the land speeder. They go and they get attacked by the Tuscan Raiders. For some reason, Luke hears noises and doesn't be like, we should get the fuck out of here. Instead, he takes his shitty rifle and goes and almost gets killed. Obi-Wan saves them. They come back, but then I wrote my notes here, Obi-Wan's loose lips. Like, Obi-Wan just spills the beans. And I don't understand that. I never really looked at it through that lens. Is there any humor in that to you too, where suddenly Obi-Wan he's like living as a hermit. Suddenly he's known this guy for a while. They've obviously encountered, and then suddenly he's like, yeah, I knew your father. And he's just lying to him about shit. He was
why
he was
then?
A good friend. Was he? I mean, was he a good friend? What the fuck are you talking about? You guys hated each other.
See that I love that little soliloquy there, that little moment where he's talking about Anakin, but they could have done that justice. Again, we're going to try to keep this positive, but they could have really done everything that Obi-Wan said there justice in the prequel trilogy had they played that out better. Had they really made that friendship authentic instead of whatever that ended up being. But yeah, the whole Obi-Wan Luke thing is interesting. I know you haven't seen the Obi-Wan series yet. A lot of this dynamic is, I don't want to say retconned, but we'll keep it positive and say a lot of this dynamic is fleshed out in that series. And without spoiling it, basically that Obi-Wan is watching over Luke and protecting him from afar. Okay. And they do acknowledge that when Luke says, Ben, oh, am I glad to see you? So they've had some interaction.
Right, exactly.
And Luke talks about him at the dinner table, right? Mm-hmm. So, you know what I mean? There's some sort of familiarity. They're not strangers, but it does beg it definitely conjures up questions of, well, what interactions have they had since Luke was an infant to being 19? Why did this never come up? And if not, why now? Like, what is what is the why is there such a fire under Ben's ass to get Luke and whisk him away now? And I know it's the movie and it's fiction, they got to have a story, so it's got to be at some point, but it is very quick. Like, there's no gathering ahead of steam. It's not subtle, it's not gradual. It's like all of a sudden, here's everything. Here's a lightsaber, here's a story, your dad. It's almost kind of
a lot.
It's almost like he might as well just have told him his dad was Vader right there and just got done with it. He went 90% of the way and stopped short of 100%. But
it's so funny after not saying anything for so long. Gives him the lightsaber, right?
Gives him the lightsaber.
Like, what is going on here? But it's funny nonetheless, and yeah, obviously awesome performances there too. We talked a little bit about them, but I wanted to get your takes on the Jawas and the Tuscan Raiders. Let's start with the Jawas first. I love the Jawas. Another one of the cool settings in the movie to me is inside the Sandcrawler. It reminds me a lot of Super Star Wars on SNES because that fucking stage is so hard. You go up that one stage where you go on the side of it, then you go inside of it. I'm like, so fucking that game is so unnecessarily hard,
ridiculous.
And but I like the Jawas are awesome. See, this is like where all the cool stories and world building come from without saying much. These kind of scrap collector nomads. They have this crude but gigantic craft. They go around and trade. It seems like they have peaceful relations with, for instance, the farmers and others, because you see them in Mos Eisley as well. I dig the Jawas, and I know that they're a staple of Star Wars, especially Tatooine Star Wars, but what do you make of them, and especially the Sandcrawler as a setting and kind of a device? It's neat. It's so huge, and we don't really get to see it too much.
I love the dynamic. This is the design of Star Wars and why it's still some of the most brilliant stuff ever created visually. You have these little tiny people, this little tiny tribe of people, the Jawas, and then this giant, humongous vehicle that they drive around. This giant armored tank with like 8 treads on it, so many more times bigger. Like, you would never, that size relationship is just, it's so artistically on point. Like that's just interesting. And the little windows up top, so the Jawas have to take an elevator or climb all the way to the top just to see out the driver windows. I love the scale. I just think it's so beautifully done. There's something I was thinking about though, Kyle, and it's one of those Star Wars moments. I have a lot of these actually for some reason. Even though I've been a fan and a super fan for so long, I have questions about the Jawas. Now, are they some sort of, I don't know, robotic android-like thing with the brown robes and they have the dark brown bandages, or are they some sort of like averse to the sun, very fair-skinned alien creatures under there that have to wrap themselves that way? And then how do you, in the cloaks, in the bandages to protect themselves from the sunlight, or do they actually, is this their actual form? And then how do you explain the eyes? These light up, incandescent, glowing eyes. Like, I honestly was watching at this time. I was like, I honestly don't know are they supposed to have a different appearance underneath it? These little tiny, pasty skinned things that protect themselves from the sun, or is this their outfit really look like this? Does nobody know? Is it mysterious? I really wasn't sure. I love the idea of these desert scavengers. They're essentially thieves, right? Going from town to town and flipping stolen goods, basically.
Yeah, well, they're like scavengers, right? I don't know that they're thieves as much as
Where
they're
do they
like.
get these robots from?
I think it seems to me, they remind me a little bit of the Quarians in Mass Effect.
Okay.
Where they just kind of live on the go, and they just kind of collect, like, very nomadic. Because I think they explicitly say, like, these droids aren't stolen, and it seems like I don't know. I don't know that they have the might to do it. But I'm reading a little bit about, like, there are stories about what they look like under their hoods, and it's unclear, but it says it's a rodent-like creature here.
Oh, that's interesting. But either way, you would have to think they're averse to the sunlight. You would think,
right? Yeah.
They dress.
Yeah, I don't know why I never thought of that. Like, what the fuck are they? I don't know why I never thought of that.
What are those? Because they look so cool. You just want them to be that thing. But then when it makes sense, and it could be that whole just desert nomadic people where they're just protecting themselves from the extreme heat and temperatures and sunlight. Maybe it's not debilitating to them. Maybe it's just a matter of comfort. I like the rodent creature thing. I like the fact that there's actually a mystery still intact in Star Wars.
Yeah, I don't know. This might be known at this point, but I'm not seeing anything. Not that I'm.
That's
searching
pretty
very
cool.
hard.
That's pretty cool. That I hope it's kind of an open ended.
Like, I'm seeing pictures, but they seem to be fan art of, like, what it could be. As opposed to,
okay.
Yeah.
Not a Macquarie illustration or something.
No.
Okay.
Nothing like that. What about Tuscan Raiders? About them? I think they're pretty cool. We don't see them very much in this. They're obviously hostile. These seem to be the hostile desert dwellers as opposed to the Jawas. They seem to have beef with the Jawas too. But do you have any thoughts on these guys other than one almost kills Luke?
That thing is out to brain Luke.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, these things are vicious. That's a stark reminder of that. I mean, of course, we'll get more of the Tuscan Raiders when Anakin gets involved with the Sand people.
Jeez Louise. No wonder they want to kill Luke.
Children.
They can sense it.
But yeah, I like the fact that they're like another entity, like another tribe, another fearsome tribe in the desert. It makes it feel like, and later on we'll have things like the Sarlacc, right? And then you think of things like the herd of banthas and stuff like that. Like, there's things that still exist in this place that doesn't really lend itself necessarily very well to life. But there's still not only is there life, but there's danger in this place. And the crate dragon skeleton, like, there's things that live on this world that might not be the best to coexist with people. The Tuscan Raiders are definitely cool. That's where you come into maybe the pirate thing, thieves, just a hostile group of people that are gonna steal, that are gonna plunder. Hopefully not rape. I don't know. And what do those things look like underneath?
I don't know. Dengar, maybe. Dengar and the Tuscan Raiders look similar to me.
Okay. Right.
I don't think so. I don't think that's true. Yeah, who knows? They're probably like reptilian or something weird like that. All right. Christ. All right, let's talk about the droids, since we were talking about the Jawas, and there's a lot of droids seen with the Jawas. Obviously, R2 and 3PO are awesome, and they're talked about a lot. But what do you think about the general atmosphere of droids and robots and how they handle it in this film? It's so funny when you can see that they were just still figuring it out. Like, there's that weird clown-looking robot with the crazy eyes on the Sandcrawler, and that face. I'm like, what the fuck is this?
That thing is crazy.
And obviously, the trash bin robot that everyone knows, like the brick trash bin that's just clearly the 1970s like mall trash container with the legs on it, which is so funny. And that always stuck out to me, like, immediately from the first time I saw it. But generally speaking, I like this idea of robotics, and there's actually something interesting because, again, they're playing with different ideas of what the droids mean and all of this, because when they go to Mos Eisley, they're like, we don't serve their kind here. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? There are droids everywhere. What is that all about? So they almost position it to be a little bit more a little bit more different, I should say, than it ends up being, where they're maybe not as ubiquitous at one time or something like that, or that wasn't intended to be that way. You have to leave your droids outside and things of this nature. But outside of 3PO and R2, or if you want to talk about them too, what do you think about the droids and their representation in this first Star Wars film?
I think C-3PO and R2-D2 are two of the best characters in fiction. You know, you have that buddy dynamic. You think of like the typical buddy relationship in TV and films and fiction, like Laurel and Hardy, Bert and Ernie, sort of the life mates. You've Jay and Silent Bob, right? Like the hetero life mates, you know, but there's definitely it's the odd couple, right? One's persnickety and uppity and, you know, one and sort of a coward. The other one's more courageous and more hard scrabble, and, you know, but they love each other, but they're very different. And I read something recently that I wasn't aware of. I knew how inspired George Lucas was by the films of Akira Kurosawa. And we all think of the Seven Samurai, Yojimbo, Ikaru, all these. But I had never seen The Hidden Fortress. And I heard that Lucas was heavily inspired by The Hidden Fortress, by the two peasant characters that film revolves around, and telling the story from the vantage point of the two most seemingly insignificant characters. The characters who are sort of the lowest on the totem pole, and showing the story from their perspective. And that R2-D2 and C-3PO were the proxy of the peasants in the Hidden Fortress, and that they were telling the story by these two basically bystander characters, and was seeing the world through their eyes, which I thought was really kind of a clever conceit. I really love that. And just the idea of droids in Star Wars in general is really fascinating, because even by the end of this film, you know, we have the astromech droids, we have the gonk droid, we have protocol droids. The whole idea of the robot is to help the humans or the whatever the sophisticated races to, you know, to help them with tasks, whether it's helping with the moisture evaporators or helping to pilot a ship or understand another language. I always got the gonk droid as like a walking battery. Like that must be like just a walking energy source that you could plug into things. I'm not sure what the gonk droid is, but I always got that vibe from it. And the different, just from the shape of the different droids on the Lars homestead, like you're like, oh, that one must do this. It kind of leaves a lot to your imagination. Oh, this one must be good for communication. This one looks like maybe it's good at repairs, that kind of thing. But I love the whole idea of having robots in various helpful capacities. But then the Mos Eisley bartender comment, there must be, you know, stories in this universe where those droids, those robots go wrong. Later on, we'll meet EV-99.
Mm-hmm. The torture droid.
Return of the Jedi, which was the torture droid, which was supposedly a protocol droid that actually of its own accord became evil in some way.
Is that in Tales from Jabba's Palace?
I think that is.
Yeah.
I think there's one of the main stories either revolves around EV-99 or her story is integral to another story. But, you know, so I like that too, where it's like, oh, wow, like sometimes, you know, these helpful things might run afoul of humans and it goes wrong. And that's interesting, to the point of like bartenders there's people that don't trust them and don't want to be around them and don't want them mixing with other, you know, with actual, you know, human or, I don't know, organic life forms and stuff like that. So that's interesting. But I love the colorful nature of the way Star Wars does it. You know, it's grounded. It's a thoughtful way to tie these things into the story, but it also just kind of looks cool and makes for a really cool visual world that's colorful. And that might be one of the things that drew us in as kids. You know what I mean? You have that sort of cartoony, colorful, fun aspect to the design where it's, you know, it's kind of fun to look at.
Yeah. Shout out also to the mouse droids on the Death Star. Were really cool. You can tell they're just remote control cars or something, but it's a cool that's a cool idea. And so I dig that. And yeah, that we see more droids later on. I brought up 21B jokingly before, which is an Empire, the back to tank droid, the medical droid. But I love that droid. I think that some of the designs they get to later on are super cool. And of course, they play around with cyborgs as well with the Lobot and Empire. But yeah, at this point, it's pretty basic and we don't see too much of it. And it's fairly limited. C-3PO says something that I think is very weird, though. I was wondering if you caught this. I never really thought about this before.
Yeah.
When he's talking to Uncle Owen says to him, what I really need is a droid who understands the binary language of moisture evaporators. 3PO says, evaporators, sir, my first job was programming binary load lifters very similar to your vaporators in most respect. And Uncle Owen's like, can you speak Bachi? And 3PO says, of course I can, sir. It's like a second language to me. I was, shut up. And then so on and so forth. What the hell is 3PO talking about? His first job he's like, I don't even understand what he's saying. He's been with them the entire time, right? Until, am I crazy?
Oh, right. Because you're thinking about the prequels.
Right. That prequel doesn't really square with that. Like, doesn't Anakin make him from scratch?
That's right. Yeah.
And then 3PO is whisked away into this whole situation. He doesn't have any fucking jobs like that.
He wasn't a warehouse droid or load lifters or whatever that signifies.
He's just straight up. So did 3PO lie to Uncle Owen to save himself?
Oh, that's really interesting. I think they just didn't catch that when they created the prequels, but
they caught it. They didn't care.
Somebody told Jordy, no, I don't care. It's fine. Whatever. But I like the fact that maybe 3PO knew enough to kind of save his skin. That makes it more interesting.
Yeah, that gives it a whole nother dynamic. Who knows?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah, what is he saying? Because we've literally been with them. There is a gap in time, I guess, between episode 3 and episode 4, but that wouldn't be his first job.
No, by that point he was already like working in the Senate and doing all this kind of. He's full of shit. 3PO's lying.
He's trying to be more fit, like he's trying to be more blue collar.
Yeah, definitely. Just get his bona fides.
White collar droid.
And then he does right by R2. I mean, he does save R2 in that situation as well. And also shout out to R5D4, probably the figure I owned that I couldn't get involved the most. Like, I don't know what I was supposed to do with that droid. In fact, I remember, how he has a little thing that pops up and it breaks. I remember they gave the figure like a missile launcher or something. It was like so 90s. It's like, what the fuck is this? It doesn't have a missile launcher. He's supposed to be like an astromech droid.
He's an astro droid. That's interesting. Goodness. I liked his little ratcheting head though on the original figure. That was kind of sophisticated for back then. That might have been the first, right? Like FX7 had all the arms that popped in and out. Like that was one of those rare. The Gonk droid too kind of clicked. Had that sort of, most Star Wars 5-point of articulation figures didn't have stuff like that. So R5D, he was a rando, but again, colorful, like just a little different shape than R2, more of a cylindrical shape to the head, different facial components, different colors. Again, sort of that cartooniness, right?
Throw him in the Y-wing. Fuck him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We might see an R5D4 like droid in some of the Rebel ships later. Yeah, right?
Probably. I don't know. I'm not that nerdy anymore. I would have known the answer to that at one point. Like I told you, when someone told me Dengar was in Return of the Jedi, which we've talked about extensively, that broke my brain to such a degree that I was like, I'm not a real Star Wars fan. How did I not know this? I didn't believe it. I would have bet $1,000. I was like, when I was like, bullshit. Shut the fuck up.
There he is.
Dengar's not in Return of the Jedi. What are you talking about? So much confidence. All right. I wanted to also ask you about the costuming in the film. Obviously, the individual soldier units all look great. So whether it's the stormtrooper / sandtrooper, the rebel soldiers in the beginning look dope as hell, and you see one of them in the turret on Yavin 4 as well. X-wing pilots look awesome. TIE fighter pilots look awesome. Death Star gunners look awesome. We went into the Imperial officers, but generally speaking, there's just a lot of great job with the costuming, with the leads. Mos Eisley Cantina, and so on and so forth. What do you think about all of that? I feel like that's really what makes, in addition to the environment, I mean, everything kind of makes the movie, but this real dedication to this lack of extravagance, this actual grounded. Mos Eisley is like a spaceport, is very worn down. Everyone's ships are kind of rickety. It's obviously not a lot of legal shit going on here. It's not the center of the Empire. It's on the outer rim, as we find out, and all the rest. It couldn't be any further away, they say, from action. But what do you make about the costumes really selling it, especially on Tatooine?
They're awesome. I mean, it's such a thought out world. There had to be, as we know, there was so much visual development put into it, so much thought put into that aspect of it. And yeah, every single component. It's funny. I was thinking about like old school Westerns and John Ford and Kurosawa and even the old campy sci-fi serials, Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers and stuff. And I was thinking like, yeah, it's sci-fi came such a long way as Star Wars started to blossom in the later 70s, where it was like in the old days, it was bad guys wear black, good guys wear white. But those kind of tropes do carry over. Like, look at Luke, look at Leia, to a large degree, Han, Vader. Like, it still kind of maintains that sort of heritage, that fiction heritage of the bad guys in black and the good guys in white. And
That's
stuff
so
like
white.
That.
That's so interesting. Do you think Han is white and black?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, because he kind of combines the both things.
I never thought about that.
He does have that gray, countenance where it's like, yeah, he's kind of not good. He becomes better, but Han is certainly on the fence when it comes to, good or bad. But it's interesting. That's what I always loved about it. It's such a grounded, lived in world, and the contrast, you do have the clean, glossy, seemingly wealthy, antiseptic settings of the interiors of the Star Destroyers and certainly the Death Star. And then you have the scrappy, hard scrabble rebellion with their equipment and their outfits. I mean, those flight helmets look like they're passed on from dead pilot to new pilot. I mean, they're a mess.
It's awesome.
And the ships are falling apart. You see that dynamic right from the beginning. I love the symbolism actually with the huge, brooding, obviously new Star Destroyer chasing the little Corvette or blockade runner that looks like it's literally falling apart. This huge dynamic, multi-million-dollar ship chasing this thing that looks like it's going to fall to pieces any second. And I love that dynamic, and I love that lived-in world from Tatooine. Luke's kitchen where he's eating dinner, like it looks like a place where these characters exist. It doesn't look like a set. At no point, no matter where you are in the movie, does it look like a place that you can't believe. It looks like, even the interior of the Millennium Falcon, they do a great job with that. It looks really worn and lived in and old and in need of updating. That's where I think Star Wars really took sci-fi. And don't get me wrong, we had things already, like I think of Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Shout out to that movie that was already doing it. That was 69, I think. So almost 10 years earlier. But Star Wars was really the one to make sci-fi from Star Trek to something that looked like, basically would be the introduction and the inspiration to what would become cyberpunk, where it would be like, the world, it's a mashup of futuristic and what we know to be just life on Earth at this given time, inner city, whatever, gritty, that type of thing. And Star Wars is really the one to kick that off in popularity. I think Star Wars is the one who created, that single-handedly created visually cyberpunk. I don't think cyberpunk would have existed visually without Star Wars.
Yeah, because and it's interesting, like, just the fusion of lived in, worn with new and gilded, not unlike Alien, I suppose, of the same time.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you there. And since we brought it up, let's talk about another thing I wanted to bring up, which was the ships. Were the ships? I don't want to talk about the Millennium Falcon. I think it's played out. It's an awesome ship. I think we get it.
It's a character.
X-Wings and TIE Fighters are also played out, but I'd rather talk about them. And Y-Wings, of course, much less played out. I love these ships. I don't know how they got the form factors of these things so right. The idea of the kind of the finned TIE fighter flanked by these solar panel wings, and the X-Wing just going into that X formation, and the Y-Wing looking a little more rickety, but still capable of its own. And we see we get the TIE bomber in Empire, and then in the Cloud Car and stuff like that, the Clown Car. And then in Return of the Jedi, it gets wild. I mean, shout out shout out to A-Wing, B-Wing, TIE Interceptor. So cool. Here we get them a little more simple, but again, it feels, even the colors, like you're saying, the dark versus the light, the worn versus the new and gilded again. Shout out to the TIE fighter pilots. Very cool. What is Darth Vader constantly turning on his console? You ever notice that? Like when he's like, what are you doing? Like that was the direction they gave him. Everyone else is being normal. And like every time they show Vader, he's like twisting a knob.
Looks like he's opening a bottle.
Right. It's like, what are you doing? But what do you think of the ships in A New Hope?
There's an episode, I think, of Dexter's Lab that parodies that so great. Like he's constantly twisting. Like it turns out he's like has a flask of something or something like that. It's so funny. It is really weird. It's like I like that they did something to make it look like he's involved in switching. You know, George Lucas is such a hot rod hound, right? So it's like he's got to be flipping a switch or doing something
That's interesting.
techie, but that was a weird one. That was definitely a weird one. Like Han flipping the switch when he's in the gunner bay or whatever, and he's flipping it. That makes more sense. But yeah, man, I mean, shout out to these iconic spaceships. I mean, yeah, we're in the fledgling outing, so it's just on the rebellion side, on the good guy side, it's just Y-wings and X-wings. I gotta say, man, the X-wing is probably one of the most beautiful designs ever of anything. I know, you know, a lot of people will say, what are the most beautiful man-made things ever created? And a lot of people will say the Spitfire. A lot of people will say the P-51 Mustang. And they're gorgeous looking machines. They're just beautiful. Some people will say certain cars, whatever your taste in cars, a tank, whatever. But the X-wing is exquisite. And now, being nearly an antique, right? We're like, what, 5 years away from Star Wars, from this film being an antique. This thing still looks like the spaceship I'd want to fly. I love the S.
I would love to ride an X-wing.
I mean, that is a design that has withstanded the test of time. And the TIE fighter, man. I mean, is there any more iconic spaceship? And I would love to know, some of you guys and gals out there may know the inspiration for this. I'm sure Macquarie designed it. And a lot of his stuff, a lot of his visual development is really cool, because before they rein it in to create the final thing, it gets pretty out there. But that sphere, kind of flanked by those two flat, huge panels with the sphere in the center, it's so original. And I can't even picture a world without that design. The TIE fighter is an icon, is an absolute icon. And it inspired so much of what was to come, science fiction wise. But you know, the interesting thing about the TIE fighter is it's impossible to copy it. As soon as you copy that TIE fighter, it's so unique, you'll know exactly what you're copying. So it kind of has this built-in copyright protection because it's such a unique sort of form, right?
Yeah, who would dare?
Really
who would dare do something like that?
Yeah, it's just, you know, the X-wing you could kind of copy. You could integrate different parts of the X-wing, the sleekness, maybe the S-foils, the way they interlock and all that kind of stuff. You could take bits and pieces, but as soon as you try to steal the TIE fighter, it's going to be way too egregious of a lift. You can't even steal it. It's just beautiful. And then, of course, the flying wedges, those gigantic arrowheads, and how menacing the Star Destroyers look. And then later on, we'll see fleets of those and then realize how big they are. That's unbelievable.
And the Super Star Destroyer we'll see as well.
The Super Star Destroyer.
Super Star Destroyer. I think is Admiral Akbar
seeing
calls
how
it.
small that is compared to the Death Star.
Right.
But it's this massive spaceship that shouldn't, by any means, looking at it, be able to fly. It's so massive, and then you have this gigantic spaceship station on top of that. So, yeah, just shout out to the dynamic nature of the designs and the Corvette too, the blockade runner in the beginning of Star Wars. I love that design, man. And the way they leverage it later on and explain that hammerhead design in Rogue One is really cool. But just starting out, like these designs, it's amazing. Like, it's one thing to impress audiences in 77 with so much of what we've never seen before, but to be talking about it with such reverence 45 years later is insane.
Yeah,
like, nothing has held up like that.
I agree. And shout out to Rogue One. I mean, we often talk about how much we love that movie, but such a wonderful, and I would say even essential connective tissue for this original film. In my opinion, a rare ball out of the park. And although I feel the same way as I think it's better than Solo, but I feel the same way about Solo, where I was like, this movie's fucking great. I love that shit.
Yeah, they feel more in tune with the universe that we initially fell in love with. That's why I think you're going to like Andor. Andor feels like in many ways a continuation. Or
yeah, one day I'll bite and get all. I mean, I haven't seen any of this shit. None of it. Not one minute of Mandalorian or anything that has come from the Star Wars universe. So yeah, that is something I'll have to check out at one point, especially because honestly, my favorite Star Wars moment are the AT-ATs on that beach planet with the palm tree. I mean, that was like goosebump where I was like, this is fucking so cool. This is Star Wars, a war movie, believe it or not. Yes. And I love in A New Hope how, and you were saying this, and I was ignorant of this, and I still am totally ignorant of it, but I'm not a film guy at all. I just don't know anything about it. But George Lucas's student of film status with just the cockpit shots and all of that, which I had no idea came from World War II movies when I was a kid. I had no idea. I was like, oh yeah, it's Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars does that, but that actually was modernized by George Lucas and the dogfighting of the World War II movies and probably Korean War movies that he enjoyed. So I love stuff like that and how he drew from that. Even the scrolls, like the text scroll. I had no idea that came from Johnny. What was it? Is it
Flash Gordon?
Flash
did that,
Gordon, yeah.
And Buck Rogers did.
Buck Rogers, I was gonna say. Yeah, I was gonna say Johnny Quest. That's like way too new. Yeah, Buck Rogers is what I was thinking of. Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's cool, and that's just lost on me. But I'm sure that was not lost on a lot of people. So I wanted to ask you, we brought it up earlier, but let's talk about the Death Star. Do we think the Death Star is cool or what? Or how do we feel about the Death Star? Iconic super weapon, maybe the most famous super weapon in all film, all fiction. Is it cool or what do we think?
Yeah, I mean, to have whatever you want to call it, a super weapon, a space station, maybe a glorified spaceship that's just a giant orb, to have a man-made creation that is approximately the size of a moon is that's an awesome idea. I mean, what could be more devastating? And later on they do this where it'll fly over certain planets and it'll just eclipse the light and you'll see it you'll see it in the atmosphere of wherever you're living and stuff like that. What could be more devastating or intimidating than something nearly the size maybe of the planet you're living on, hovering over it, with bristling with weapons and shit like that? Like, it's fucking awesome. To go back, I talk about this a lot. I'm sure we talked about this on the Return of the Jedi conversation, but I loved going back and recreating it only because I loved the idea of just seeing it incomplete. I love the moxie of saying we're going to do this over again, just better this time. Was it better? I don't know, but I love the idea of seeing it being constructed, like seeing it and still being able to be a menace, even though it wasn't completed, was really cool. But I love the idea of the Death Star. I mean, that's so cool that, from afar, you're like, that's a planet. Oh shit. No, that's obviously metallic. And, that's obviously made by man. I mean, how strong was the Empire, like, that they could even create something like this?
That's the other interesting thing about this. I didn't want to get too deep into it because it's boring for a lot of people, but I love the little political things. This might be the most political of all the Star Wars films until Episode 1, and which is, I think, comically political. But they get into it. Like, he dissolves the Senate, or the Emperor tells Tarkin they've dissolved the Senate, and they're like, how are you going to run this without the bureaucracy? And it's like, well, we've decentralized everything. It's like, whoa, what the fuck are you guys talking about here? There's a lot of interesting touches to their power and their power structure and how they might have gathered this much money in this much time. And I know Rogue One gets into it, and I'm sure some of the other books and EU stuff gets into it as well. I'm not familiar with it, but yeah, shout out to the Death Star. I wanted to give that super weapon a shout out. I think it's super cool too. I think what ruined it was Return of the Jedi. I think it was so stupid to do that again. And then when they did another super weapon in Episode 7, which again, safe thing, but I'm like, come on, man. Like, aren't there other ideas than this? But if you just look at it through the 1977 lens, it's like, yeah, this is great. And the fact that they were going to build another one, it's kind of eerie and shadowy and weird, but not maybe the creative decision that I would have made. The final thing I want to talk to you about, Dagan, we can talk about whatever you want that we haven't touched on after this, is I want to talk to you about the special edition, 1997 20th anniversary special edition. I had mentioned it earlier in the show. I remember seeing this in the theater in 8th grade. Mom would pull me out of school to go see these in the theater. Actually, I think it was the spring of 97. So it might have actually been 7th grade, but they came out consecutive months, I remember, and Mom would pull me out of school to go see each of them.
Yeah.
Which was cool because I was such a Star Wars head, and it was just,
that's awesome.
But so I bought, probably in 2014 or 2015, I bought all of the Star Wars movies on Amazon. So, and they were like $70. And at the time I was like, God, what a fucking ripoff. But I've gone back to them and touched on them as I've needed to. And that's what I did here. So it's built up its value, which is really nice. But unfortunately, these versions of the movies are the special editions. And I've never really been a super special edition hater. I think episode 4 has always kind of been the most egregious, especially with the Jabba scene, which I feel like is just not very good. Boba Fett's in there for some reason. Like, what do you got? God almighty. Like, what are you doing? And can't we just leave anything alone? But I do like the addition of the Biggs scene that they cut, at least one of them, and some other stuff. But and I want to keep it positive, but my honest take is that it just doesn't look very good anymore. It doesn't look right. They should remove this shit, not because they can't edit it or do whatever they want, but because it looks like shit. The dewback looks like shit. It's just the droid holding the lumber or whatever it was holding, or the metal pipes.
They're fighting.
I remember buying that action figure. Like, they just made that just to make an action figure, no doubt. And then I was there at Toys R Us buying it, and it just, there's like a scene where there's a droid, like an aerial droid going ahead of some sand troopers. And I'm like, it looks bad. This just doesn't look good. What do you think about the special edition and how it's aged? And what's so interesting, I think, is that we're further away from the special edition than the special edition was from the original movie.
Wow, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
We're at 25 years past the special edition, and special edition was 20 years past Star Wars. Yeah.
Yeah. Holy shit. Yeah. I mean, Helene and I were there in the late 90s in Philly on Chestnut Street for everyone in the theater, went and saw them. And of course, they were just culminating. They were setting the table to gather interest for the prequels. It was a pretty ingenious strategy, bringing Star Wars back to the tip of everybody's tongues and everything like that. What the thing is, you remember, Kyle, I had that VHS box set of the original versions with the Leonard Maltin, George Lucas interviews at the beginning of each beginning of each movie. They were awesome. What I would really love, because maybe people grow up with the special editions and maybe they have a love for them. I would just like to be able to have the choice. I want to go back and watch the originals. I'm a nostalgic dude, and I like the originals. The thing is, the ironic part for me is George Lucas, again, it's such an interesting part of the conversation and a fascinating one, and one we probably will never fully get to the bottom of. But a big part of the vision for the special editions was the frustration that George Lucas had of having the plans to put in these things, but not having the technology or the budget, not being ready or capable of doing these things, so then putting them in later, right? So the little robots kind of bickering or fighting each other outside of Mos Eisley, or the little rat-like creatures running around outside Mos Eisley, or the Jawas wrestling with that dewback meets giraffe creature and falling off. Like, just the scene setting stuff that seems kind of arbitrary. And putting that in there, the ironic thing is all those CG additions don't hold up. Like all the stuff that's 45 years old, whether it's practical or stop motion or miniature or some kind of optical effect, all that motion control, all that kind of stuff holds up great. It's the new stuff from the late 90s that just kind of doesn't hold up for me. A lot of that CG has dated itself, the new dewbacks, the way those rat creatures don't really have any weight. Those little kind of, I don't know, they look like little tiny kangaroo rats or something. They don't really have any weight. I don't feel like they're really integrated. I feel like there's something like a little decoration put on top. It takes you out of the film. And then the more egregious thing is what we've talked about, like, of not knowing your characters. Here's the thing, like the Greedo shoots
Greedo.
first thing. I mean, this has been talked to death. But the mysterious aspect of this is not knowing your character, but also I'm the parent of 2 children. One is nearly 16 years old. So I've been a parent for 16 years now. I've never had the idea of wanting to change something just because I had kids. Does that make sense? Like, I never thought, now I'm not, maybe it's different if you're talking about your own creations, but like, for instance, like, do I want my 12-year-old to watch Taxi Driver? No. But do I want to go in and change Taxi Driver just because I have a 12-year-old? That's the most insane thing I've ever heard. In fact, I would like my kids to eventually watch a piece of iconic cinema, but they're just not there yet. I don't want to change it. Right. And I think that notion of like, well, I want to, Han is like, I don't want to make him unsavory. Know your character. This was a mercenary, right? He's all about surviving. He's run afoul of some bad dudes. He's developed this tough outer shell to help him survive. And it's the start of his journey. He's going to become a better, more selfless, more heroic individual. But at this point of his life, he's going to shoot a bounty hunter that has him cornered. That's about to murder him. That's okay. That's what I'm talking about with George Lucas. It's like, how can you create this multi-billion-dollar, $500 billion franchise and everything that's come along with it, having maybe only half understood what you even created? That was the real eye-opening thing for us in the late 90s. It was like, wow, like before the prequels even came out, and maybe you love the prequels, again, it's a divisive part of the conversation, but that's the thing. It was like, wow, you could be a creator of something and be the showrunner of something for so long, the creative lead, and not really know it. That was a really mysterious sort of thing to me. It was an eye-opening thing as a younger guy, as a younger kid, just still in college, like that could be a thing. And that's kind of what the special editions represent to me. And also just have the restraint. Like, maybe you had an idea to do something. You didn't have the technology or the budget or the know-how to do it back then, but save those ideas for a different project. You know what I mean? Or do something new with those things that you've conceptualized. Don't try to go backwards and retcon it into that thing, because it feels like almost all of it feels like, and some of it's less egregious than other things. Some of it's kind of doesn't matter at all, but it all feels shoehorned in. And I think it makes a great thing less great. You know what I mean? And maybe it makes it a little less great. Maybe it makes it much less great. That's a matter of taste. Who knows? Maybe even love it. But they seem like ideas for a different thing. Why go back and, fix it if it's not broken?
Yeah, I agree with you there 100%. It didn't, at least for me, act as this, but because I liked it at the time, but it was, it's foreshadowing of what would come, I think, with not really maybe understanding the whole tonal element and just seeing how people responded to certain things. Like I don't understand why Boba Fett's in this movie. Why is he here? What is he doing? Why is he with Jabba the Hutt? And why is Jabba the Hutt so much smaller now than he was
He grew a lot, didn't he?
See, it's just strange to me. I like that there's all this lost footage or this footage that they didn't use. And it's so peculiar to me. It's like, why did you use that footage? Again, you could have elaborated greatly on the Biggs relationship. There's a bunch of Luke's friends you never meet and all this stuff, I think, in that one scene in Anchorhead. And so it's so weird to me. Like, why did you look at all of this stuff that's not in the movie and be like, I want Jabba the Hutt in this movie? It's cool that we just reference him. And yeah, the Greedo shooting first thing just doesn't make any sense. Why would Greedo miss from that close?
And Han's little digital head thing to the side.
Right. It's just,
how can you create such genius, such beautiful design, these iconic characters, this immersive world, and then do something? It's very strange to be capable of both things. Some of the greatest things ever created in the history of man creating fiction, anything, and some of the worst decisions. And I think that's what makes it really mysterious. You could say, well, that's being a human, right? I don't think so. I've never seen a swinging scale that's that broad. It's very odd.
Yeah, I agree.
It's very odd.
I agree.
I can understand. George Lucas at a certain point became fascinated and all about what he could do with technology. I get that. That's his bread and butter. I think that's his real passion. But to sort of bolster that end of things at the detriment of what you created is odd. It's just weird. I can't even say it's good or bad because some people like it. It's just a very strange decision. And it's just, it just seems weird that you don't know your own world. Like there are millions of Star Wars fans that seem to know Star Wars better than the person that created it. That's odd to me. You might have a creator that doesn't want to talk about it, a magician that never reveals his tricks, right? All of that type of thing. I get it. Like, I get that. Like, I'm going to be silent. I'm going to be, you know what I mean? I'm going to be Alfred Hitchcock about this. I'm not going to, I don't want to talk about how it's done. I'm just going to do it. That type of thing. But I'm going to be Orson Welles. You know what I mean? I'm going to be the magician. I'm going to leave you in wonder. We're not going to discuss it. But to just inherently display over and over again that you maybe never got it. Is George Lucas the luckiest man in the world? I don't know. I don't know that we're ever going to know. How can we ever really know? Unless George Lucas sits down and writes a tell-all, pull out all the stops, no bullshit account of, look, this is how it went. He's a really fascinating individual. He really is. Even watching some interviews leading up to talking to you today, Kyle, he's an interesting dude. He's very serious. Sometimes he seems humorless, and other times it seems like the whole thing might be a wink and a nod. Like, it might be the biggest practical joke in the world. I honestly don't know with him. Maybe that makes him an uber genius.
Hopefully there's like I don't know if people have written in a biography or there have been biographies written about him, but a Walter Isaacson style authoritative biography with his participation and blessing, I think would be a must read. He's no doubt. See, part of me feels like I hear what you're saying and I actually agree with you. It's like, I feel this way about Star Wars, the new Star Wars movies. It's like, I could have written a better Star Wars movie than this. I might not have been able to write it beat for beat like a script. I could have written a treatment for a movie very easily. That would have been a trilogy. I honestly think there are maybe 1 million people out there that could have done it straight up.
Yeah,
like 1 million people could have written a better. So it's not just me. It's a lot of different people. But part of me also feels like it's audacious. Like, how the fuck is that possible that I would know it better than George Lucas? Like, whatever George Lucas thinks, it is his. Like, people often remind and say, and it's true, well, Han Solo is his character. Luke Skywalker is his character. Darth Vader is his character. Like, he did make these things up. There's some sort of genius there, but I guess not having the restraint to, for instance, you would think that knowing the experience of Industrial Lights and Magic and how good everything looks, there's this awesome shot of Lucas showing Kurosawa the AT-ATs. Have you ever seen that shot?
I think
like
I
a picture.
have. Yes.
They're on like the set.
Yes.
And knowing that they did that in basically an analog way with very rudimentary computer graphics, and it was all stop motion and all this kind of stuff in miniatures, and they did that for those 3 movies. You would think that by the time he got to 94, when he was penning episode 1, that they'd be like, well, we should just do that and have computers aid it. Why would we fix what was not broken? The movies look legendary. Now, the new ones, episodes 1, 2, and 3, rather, I should say, the middle ones, don't look bad at all. It's just that they don't look real. And so this movie, this particular A New Hope film, I guess it seeing it by itself as just a movie on its own, without all these tethers, these many cultural tethers and all the movies and everything it spawned, it really does nail what it's supposed to be. You almost wish that they stayed more within the spirit of this film. And it's a bummer that it got lost. It didn't get lost immediately. I mean, Empire is even better, but note that Empire was better without George Lucas writing it, right? Like it's
Right.
a pretty substantial portion of it. And I don't know. I'm glad to have talked about this film. Is there anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to talk about?
You know, it just makes me think about Lucas. And again, not to be negative on any of the bad Star Wars stuff or the stuff that, you know, older fans like us tend to not like as much. But it does make me think from the outset, from the mid to late 70s, if Lucas was capable of doing everything that he initially envisioned from the jump, would it have been to our liking from the jump? In other words, if let's say he accomplished 50% of what he set out to do because of how he was encumbered by not having what he needed or being able to do what he really wanted. And it came out a certain way, maybe 50% of what he envisioned. And it just so happened that 50% is what really resonated with us. And that's what really made Star Wars click. And then by the time 20 or 30 years had elapsed and he was able to go back in and really, for instance, with episode 1 and do what he really wanted to do from the inception point, that wasn't to our taste. I wonder about that. I wonder if that was a big part of, you know, in other words, we often attribute it to, well, George Lucas doesn't get what he created, but maybe it's that way. Maybe it's the way of like, maybe he did get it, but he just wasn't able to translate his full on vision because he could only do so much, because so much of what he envisioned relied on the technology that wasn't up to snuff yet. So that's a really interesting point. But I just love going back to 1977 to the inception of it all, just for the purity and the promise. And Star Wars could have been gone in any direction from this point. Who even knew what Empire Strikes Back was going to be in 1980, right? Like it's a complete, it could have went like anything. It could have went in millions of different directions. So it's so interesting to trace it back from our now 2023 perspective. It's going to be 50 years pretty soon. And to see how it started, how it launched, and love it or hate it now as an overall franchise, just how influential it's been on everything that we love and everything that we talk about. And, you know, it'll always be part of the conversation for fiction, for comic books, for science fiction, for TV, for film. Like, it's always going to be part of the conversation. It's always going to be a legendary thing, not just this film, but the franchise in general. And just, you know, something starting off as one film and becoming a behemoth. There's not too many things in this category. So it's a special conversation. You know what, the other thing I realized, Kyle? I don't know if this ever dawned on you. Princess Leia is really the hero of this film, right? Because think about the other two main characters. Luke is a starry-eyed farm boy who just longs for adventure. So it's he sort of has selfish reasons, right? Han is the mercenary smuggler out for himself, definitely beholden to the almighty dollar, just out to further his own ends, right? Now his dynamic and his journey will change, and he has the golden heart underneath, but we don't really know that so much yet, right? So those two characters have very specific reasons to undertake this journey. But here's this princess character, right? Just completely has access to everything, royal, wealthy, could have a life of privilege, and kind of eschews that in order to fight a cause for her people and live this other life. She's really the selfless hero of this story, because she's sort of, you know, completely throwing what she could have away and living a completely selfish life in order to undertake this journey that's not about her, you know, in order to fight for this greater cause. And that never really dawned on me before, because especially a boy growing up in the 70s, I love Princess Leia. I love Carrie Fisher. She definitely, you know, she's of that Hollywood royalty, that pedigree, growing up with Eddie Fisher and Debbie Reynolds, and she was a princess. And a lot of that translates into Carrie Fisher's character, and I think the sarcasm and the wit and the moxie. I think there's a lot of Carrie Fisher in there, and I always loved the character, but I definitely was all about Han and Luke. But she's really the hero of this story, especially in this first iteration, this first outing, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, she does certain key things too. Like she lies about the base on Tatooine and does all these things, buys them time. She shows a lot of bravery. And
courageous, for
and
sure.
so that's why it always bothered me. I can't speak to other fandoms, I guess, but the idea that there's some sort of sexism in the Star Wars fandom, like endemic sexism in it, always struck me as peculiar because, especially specifically with how people don't like Rey. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, people love Princess Leia. They love her. Like, people love her. She's iconic. She is visually the most iconic character in a human character in the entire movie. And it, like you said, plays a pivotal role. And then you get Mon Mothma and these other like leader characters later on that show a more feminist angle or whatever. I'm not saying that they were doing that. Same thing with Lando. Like, okay, so there's one black main character doesn't mean that something can't be racist. Okay, I understand that, but it always seemed the feminine or the female always seemed central. Even with the prequels, Amidala wasn't the problem. In fact, I think a lot of people would argue that might have been one of the better parts of the prequels was Amidala and the design of the character and Padme.
Sure.
And all of these different, and the body double and that whole idea and how central she was too, using a gun in the palace scene and fighting. So there always was this female lead that always drove me insane when it's just that no, Rey and later on Rose, these are just bad characters that no one likes because they suck.
Right.
And you betrayed the good characters in the story to play into that for some reason. It has nothing to do with gender. In fact, if you want to play the intersectional card, it's like, well, you've sacrificed the black character that was way more interesting for a Mary Sue, and that's why people don't like her. So yeah, I'm glad that you said that because to me, it's always been a very inclusive thing. Yeah, Leia's part of the team,
Yeah.
Central
and
to
Jyn in Rogue One, right?
Yep,
we have
sure.
Jyn. She's a very likable hero. And then,
Definitely.
Of course, we'll see more of Mon Mothma in Andor. I'm not that far into Andor, but she's in that.
It's dope. I love that. I love that the rebellion seems to be very much led by a contingent of females. And we see that even in the sequel movies as well. So
yes.
Leia's dope. I mean, there's no doubt about that. There's nothing to even be said about it.
She's great. She really is.
Yeah, so this was fun. I hope this was a different sort of conversation about A New Hope than people might have heard in the past. And we tried to keep it as positive as possible. I think it was pretty positive. There's so much to love in A New Hope, 1977's A New Hope. And
it's so good.
And just how legendary, everything about it, the visuals, the setting, the characters, the story. It's good to finally discuss it here on KnockBack. So thank you so much for hearing us out. And Dig, let's end this episode as we always do with a dad joke.
All right, I got a good one for you. I forgot my smartphone, so next knockback, we have one from a fan that's hilarious. But I'm going to read you this one now because this one's pretty funny. Kyle, a man was recently hospitalized with 6 plastic horses inside of him. The doctor is describing his condition as stable.
Jesus Christ. All right. Fair enough.
Makes sense.
By the way, postscript. I wrote this on my notes and I wanted to make sure to say it. You brought up Leonard Maltin.
Mm-hmm.
I love Leonard Maltin just
King
because
nerd.
he writes those books where it's like a review of every movie. And I'm like, what is Leonard Maltin doing all day? Like, how is this possible? I just feel like he just doesn't do anything but watch movies and write little blurbs.
Yeah. And you know what? You know him. He's doing it joyfully. There's not a begrudging bone in his body. He is all about it, man. He really is. He doesn't often get credited this way enough. He's kind of the king nerd because he's probably, we talk about, we anoint Kevin Smith and other guys, but Leonard Maltin's kind of the OG.
Yeah. He's the Rick Steves of movie guides. That's such a nerdy reference. I'm not even going to clarify it. But I'm glad you get it.
Nice.
That's such a nerdy reference.
Well
Shout out to Rick Steves. All right. Dig, let's get the hell out of here. I appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us today about A New Hope. We'll see you next time. We'll see you on KnockBack. We'll see you on Constellation. believe you'd see on Sacred Symbols Plus as we talk about The Last of Us on HBO.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of all things Last Stand. On Patreon, free feeds, YouTube, leave us nice reviews if you can. You can buy merch at laststandmedia.store and more. We'll see you next time. Until then, goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.